there, I'm your storyteller for tonight. If you've been looking for something to help you drift into sleep, you've come to the right place. Before we begin, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Now, relax, close your eyes, and let the rain's gentle whispers take you to a world of dreams. My name is Darren Hayes. I've been working as a forest ranger for the past 6 years. Most people think it's a simple job, just maintaining trails, checking on wildlife, ensuring tourists don't get lost. But it's more than that. At least, it was for me. I always thought I had a handle on what I might face in the woods. Snakes, the occasional bear, maybe a lost hiker. What I wasn't prepared for was the silence, the kind that's too quiet like the world is holding its breath. It was the fall of 1998 when everything changed. I had just finished a shift, driving down the winding roads of the Appalachian Mountains on my way to the station. The air was crisp, leaves painted in fiery reds and oranges, and the world seemed almost peaceful. Almost. That was when the radio crackled. "Darren, you there?" It was Mike, my supervisor. His voice was tense, like something wasn't right. "Yeah, Mike? What's going on?" "We've got a situation. A group of campers went missing near that old trail off Pine Ridge. We haven't heard from them in 24 hours. I need you to check it out." The trail Mike mentioned was one I knew well, one that locals talked about in hushed tones. It had a reputation. People had disappeared there before, and no one ever figured out why. I always thought it was just superstition, but something in Mike's voice told me this wasn't a typical missing persons case. "Got it? I'll head out right now," I said, the unease creeping in, though I didn't admit it aloud. I grabbed my gear and hit the road. The drive out to Pine Ridge was uneventful, the radio buzzing softly with static as I sped along the winding mountain roads. By the time I reached the trailhead, night was beginning to fall. The station was a good hour's drive away, so I was alone, just the forest, the mountains, and the eerie silence that seemed to follow me wherever I went. I parked my truck by the side of the road. The campsite was empty, no sign of the campers. No fire pit, no gear, nothing that would suggest anyone had stayed here recently. I scanned the area, feeling that strange heaviness in the air, like something was watching me. My boots crunched over the fallen leaves as I walked into the woods, following the trail deeper into the trees. The air was thick with mist, and the sounds of wildlife seemed strangely absent, the silence more oppressive with each step. It wasn't just quiet, it felt wrong. That's when I found it. A backpack, lying forgotten in the underbrush, its zipper half open. I approached cautiously, my fingers brushing the strap. There was no sign of struggle, no blood, no broken branches to indicate a hasty departure. Just the backpack, abandoned in the middle of nowhere. It didn't make sense. I was about to turn back when I heard it. A faint rustling, like footsteps, coming from somewhere deep in the trees. My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't alone. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The forest was silent again, too silent. The rustling had stopped as suddenly as it had started. My instincts screamed at me to run, but I forced myself to stay calm, to keep my head in the game. I hadn't come this far to turn back without answers. I gripped the handle of my flashlight tightly and began to move forward cautiously. Every step felt like a weight on my chest, the sense of being watched growing stronger with each passing moment. I swept the beam of my flashlight across the trees, the light bouncing off the fog in front of me. Nothing, but I could still feel it, the presence, like someone was out there just beyond the reach of the light, waiting. Then I heard it again. A rustle, closer this time. A sharp snap of a twig underfoot, followed by a heavy breathing sound. I froze, the beam of the flashlight trembling in my hand as I strained my ears. I wasn't imagining this. Someone or something was out there. I turned slowly, scanning the trees, my breath shallow. But there was nothing. No figure, no movement. Just the oppressive darkness of the woods. I cursed under my breath. My mind raced with possibilities. Could it be one of the missing campers? Had they gotten lost? Or was it something else? Something more sinister. I was about to call Mike when I caught movement out of the corner of my eye. A shadow too fast, too fluid to be human. It darted between the trees, disappearing before I could even react. I swallowed hard. I had seen something. I was sure of it. I tried to steady my breathing, but my pulse was racing now. I knew I needed to be cautious, but everything inside me screamed to run. I couldn't leave the trail though. Not yet. Another noise this time. A low growl, deep and guttural, coming from the shadows. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. This was no animal. It was something far worse. I slowly turned around, scanning the trees, my flashlight now sweeping across the ground as I tried to find some kind of track, anything that could explain what I was hearing. My light flickered as I moved forward, and for a split second, I thought I saw something watching me from the darkness. I stopped dead in my tracks. There, just ahead, standing motionless between the trees, was a figure. A tall silhouette, too tall to be a person. It stood still, unmoving, its form blending with the darkness of the forest. I couldn't make out any features, just a shadow. And then it spoke. "You shouldn't have come here," it rasped, its voice low and distorted, like something scraping across stone. I froze, fear washing over me like ice water. Every instinct told me to run, to escape, but my legs felt rooted to the ground. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to make sense of what was happening. This wasn't a man. It wasn't a creature I had ever seen before. Who are you?" I managed to whisper, my voice shaky. The figure didn't respond. Instead, it took a slow, deliberate step forward, and I instinctively stepped back, my flashlight beam shaking. That's when I saw its eyes. Two glowing orbs, cold and empty, staring directly at me. It was close, now too close. I could hear the scraping sound again, like nails on glass, as the figure moved toward me. I raised my flashlight, shining it straight into its face. The light flickered one last time before dying completely, and that's when it moved. In the pitch-black darkness, I could feel the presence, right in front of me. My flashlight had died, but I wasn't sure if that mattered anymore. The air around me grew heavier, suffocating, as if the forest itself was closing in. The creature, if that's what it was, shifted. I could hear its movements, slow and deliberate, but it was like it was gliding, making no sound as it advanced. The ground beneath me felt cold, almost icy, and the hairs on my neck stood on end. I took another step back, heart hammering in my chest. Then, suddenly, I heard the rustling again, the same sound I'd heard earlier. But this time, it wasn't behind me. It was from every direction, surrounding me, coming from the trees, from the ground. I was trapped. Panic set in, and I fought the urge to run. I knew it wouldn't help. The thing, whatever it was, wasn't like any animal I had ever encountered. It wasn't just a predator. It was something far darker. And then I saw a flash of movement to my right, too quick for my eyes to fully track. The figure was gone, vanished into the shadows, but the oppressive feeling didn't leave. It was still there, watching. I could feel its eyes on me, cold and penetrating, burning into my soul. My breath quickened, and I forced myself to keep calm. I needed to think, to act. Slowly, I reached for my radio. My hands were trembling, but I managed to turn the dial. Mike, do you copy?" My voice was ragged, barely audible over the static. No answer. "Mike, this is Darren. I'm at Pine Ridge. There's something out here. It's not human. Please, respond." The static crackled again, louder this time, and then Finalia voice came through, garbled and distant. "Darren, stay close. Don't go into the woods." The message cut out, and the radio went silent again. I looked around. my heart racing. What did he mean? Don't go into the woods? I was already deep in the forest. Before I could make sense of it, I heard something else, footsteps. But they weren't mine. They were deliberate, heavy, and slow, just behind me. I spun around, my breath catching in my throat. The figure was back, standing in the shadows, taller than any man I had ever seen. It didn't move, just watched me with those glowing eyes, like it was studying me. Its presence was so overwhelming that for a moment, I couldn't breathe. The forest around me seemed to pulse, alive with the energy of something ancient and powerful. You shouldn't have come here, it said again, its voice sending a shiver down my spine. My body tensed, an instinct kicked in. Without thinking, I turned and bolted, sprinting through the trees, the sound of my feet pounding against the ground, filling my ears. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to get away, had to get out of this nightmare. I heard it behind me, the scraping sound growing louder, faster. The figure was following me, its footsteps, silent but relentless. Suddenly, I tripped. My foot caught on a route, and I went sprawling forward, my body slamming into the cold earth. I tried to push myself up, but my hands were shaking, my vision spinning. I couldn't let it catch me. I couldn't let it. A sharp, high-pitched screech filled the air, and I froze. The sound was coming from everywhere. My skin crawled, and I looked around wildly, trying to see where it was coming from. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. A shadow, moving fast between the trees. Something much larger than the figure I had been running from. It was surrounded by more shadows, more creatures each, one moving with unnatural speed, their glowing eyes shining like beacons in the dark. I had to get up. I had to run, but I was paralyzed by fear, my body refusing to obey. I could hear the figure approaching, its footsteps, like the beat of a drum, steady and inexorable. It was close to close. I forced myself to my feet and stumbled forward, crashing through the underbrush. My breath ragged, my legs burning with exhaustion. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I could feel it gaining on me. Every step I took was harder than the last, my legs heavy and aching from the relentless sprint. The sound of those heavy, unnatural footsteps behind me grew louder, a constant reminder that I wasn't escaping. It was inevitable. Whatever was chasing me was faster, stronger, and it seemed to know this forest far better than I did. I didn't dare look back. Faye, I did. I knew I wouldn't have the courage to keep running. I pushed forward, limbs shaking with fear, but determination still driving me forward. The trees around me seemed to blur, their dark shapes warping in the corner of my vision, and the low growl from the figure seemed to echo through the woods, bouncing off every tree and branch. It was only when I crashed through a particularly thick patch of undergrowth that I finally stumbled upon it, the edge of the forest. I could see the faint outline of the clearing ahead, a sliver of moonlight cutting through the trees, illuminating the path beyond. I wasn't sure where I was headed, but there was no time to question it. I forced my way toward the open ground, stumbling into the clearing, my heart pounding in my ears, and that's when I heard it, something louder than the growl. A terrifying sound that seemed to shake the ground beneath my feet. The screech. The same one I'd heard earlier, only now it was much closer. It was coming from all directions, like a chorus of voices, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end as I felt the weight of the darkness closing in. I barely had time to react. From the shadows of the trees, figures emerged, grotesque and twisted. Their limbs were elongated, their bodies distorted, like something out of a nightmare. They moved like shadows, their eyes glowing with an eerie light, and their mouths hung open in a silent snarl, as though they were waiting for something. I didn't know what these creatures were, but I had seen enough to know that they weren't meant to be here, and I wasn't meant to be either. My instincts kicked in. I couldn't fight them. There were too many, but there was one thing I could do. I turned and ran into the clearing, my legs burning with every step. My breath was ragged, but I pushed through the pain. My only thought was to reach the road, to get back to the truck, to get to safety. But as I neared the edge of the clearing, I saw it. The road only. It wasn't the road I remembered. It was twisted, like everything around me had been warped. The trees, the ground, even the air seemed to bend and twist in impossible ways. I couldn't stop myself. I kept running toward it, but as I neared, I felt something grab me, a cold, invisible force pulling me back. I screamed, but no sound escaped my mouth. And then I saw him, Mike. He was standing there, just beyond the edge of the twisted road, his figure distorted like everything else around me. But it was him. I recognized the shape of his silhouette, the familiar stance. He was waiting for me. Mike, I screamed, but my voice barely carried. He didn't respond. He just stood there, motionless, his eyes glowing with the same eerie light as the creature's. But it wasn't fear that gripped me now, it was something else. Something far darker. It was then that I realized the truth. Mike wasn't waiting for me. He was one of them. The world around me seemed too slow as I watched Mike stand in the clearing, his figure a distorted reflection of what I knew. His eyes glowed with that unnatural light, the same as the creatures closing in around me. My heart sank as a horrifying realization gripped Mike. Wasn't Mike anymore. Whatever force had been lurking in these woods, it had taken him, just as it had taken the others. I took a step backward, my feet unsteady, as if the very ground was pulling me down into the earth. The air was suffocating, thick with the sense of something ancient, something wrong. The creatures, their glowing eyes, still locked on me, began to close in, their movements fluid and unnerving. The screeches filled the air, and the distant howl from the forest echoed louder. The woods themselves seemed to press in from all sides, wrapping me in a web of darkness. Mike, I called out, my voice breaking. What happened to you? Where are the others? But Mike's lips didn't move. He didn't respond. His eyes, however, flickered, a hint of recognition, or perhaps it was pity flashing across them. I didn't know what to make of it, but it sent a chill through me that settled deep in my bones. The figure, the thing that had once been my friend, raised its hand slowly, its fingers long and twisted, and I could feel the air grow heavier as the shadows seemed to gather around it. The trees creaked, and the ground trembled beneath me. It was as if the very forest was alive with hunger, and I was its prey. You've come too far, Darren, the creature whispered, its voice like dry leaves scratching across stone. You've crossed the line, and now there is no turning back. The darkness seemed to grow, the trees bending toward me, reaching for me. I could feel the pull of something, an invisible force dragging me forward, pulling me into the heart of the woods. And Mike, no, whatever had become of Mike, stood there, silent, watching me, as though waiting for me to succumb to it. I couldn't just give up. I had to find a way out. I turned and ran again, my breath ragged, heart pounding in my chest, but the path ahead seemed to shift, to twist, like it was changing before my eyes. I could hear footsteps behind me, light, quick, unnaturally fast. The creatures were closing in, their growls and hisses growing louder with each passing second. I was running blind, driven by nothing more than the primal urge to survive. The woods felt like a maze, the trees closing in tighter, the shadows longer. Every turn I made only seemed to lead me further into the unknown. There was no escape, and then I stumbled right into the clearing again. But this time, it wasn't the clearing I had seen before. It was different. The trees were twisted, the air thick with the smell of decay. In the center of the clearing stood a massive stone structure, half buried in the earth, covered in strange runes and symbols. It was ancient, older than the forest itself, and something about it made my blood run cold. The creatures had stopped. They didn't move, didn't approach. They just stood there, as if waiting for something. I approached the stone structure cautiously, the strange symbol seeming to pulse in time with the beat of my heart. I didn't understand what they meant, but something inside me told me I had to touch it. I had to make contact with whatever this was. As my hand brushed against the stone, a jolt of energy shot through me, the shock so strong, it almost knocked me off my feet. The symbols flared to life, glowing with an eerie light, and I saw something that made my blood freeze. The forest was not just alive, it was connected to something far older, something buried beneath the earth. And the creatures, the shadows, the watchers, they weren't just guardians of the forest. They were its prison, and I had just released them. The ground shook violently, and the sky above me darkened, swirling like a storm. The creatures began to howl, a terrible, distorted sound that seemed to tear at the fabric of reality itself. I had made a terrible mistake, but now there was no turning back. The earth trembled beneath my feet, sending shock waves through my body. The stone under my hand pulsed, as if alive, and the strange symbols etched into its surface seemed to shift, their patterns warping and twisting in a maddening dance. I stumbled back, heart racing, as the creatures that had been waiting in the shadows began to stir. They weren't just waiting, they were anticipating something. Their eyes gleamed with a malevolent hunger, and as the ground continued to shake, the air around me grew thick, suffocating, almost tangible. It was as if the very forest was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I tried to pull away from the stone, but my body refused to obey. It felt as if something was pulling me toward it, drawing me closer, and no matter how hard I fought, I couldn't break free. A whisper filled my ears, a sound that wasn't a sound at all, just a sensation that seeped into my mind, like a cold wind brushing against my thoughts. "You've awakened us." The voice was low, deep, and ancient, like the very forest itself was speaking to me. I tried to scream, to call for help, but my voice was swallowed by the darkness. I could feel the pressure building, the overwhelming weight of something ancient and terrible stirring beneath the ground. And then, in a flash of cold light, it happened. The ground split open. A crack ran through the earth, jagged and violent. And from the depths of the chasm, something rose, something monstrous. It was a presence, an entity that filled the entire clearing with its power. I could feel it in the air, in the trees, in every fiber of my being. It was a force beyond comprehension, something that defied the laws of nature itself. The creatures gathered around it, bowing, their eyes full of reverence, as they chanted in a language I couldn't understand. The sky above me seemed to darken further, and the very air felt thick with tension. I could hear Mike's voice, faint and distant, calling to me, "Darren, get away from there." I tried to turn, to escape, but my body was frozen. I was trapped, held by the dark force that now filled the forest. The creature that had risen from the earth was no longer a shadow, it was something real, something tangible. Its form was vast, swirling with darkness, and its eyes were like black pits, endless and void-like. "You've opened the gate," the entity boomed, its voice shaking the very ground beneath me. "Now you must face the consequences." I felt my legs give way, and I collapsed to the ground, my hands trembling. I was trapped between the force of the earth and the creatures surrounding me. There was no escape. From the edges of the clearing, I saw something shift movement in the trees. More figures emerged, tall and imposing, their bodies cloaked in shadows, their faces hidden behind masks. They were walking toward me, their steps deliberate and heavy. I didn't know what they were, but I knew they weren't human. "You have unleashed what was never meant to be free," one of the figures said, its voice hollow and dissonant. "Now, the veil is torn, and there will be no return." As the figures closed in, I could feel the weight of their presence, their power. I had awakened something ancient and dangerous, something that had been waiting for centuries, buried deep within the earth. And now, it was free. The creatures surrounding me seemed to bow, their whispers growing louder, more frenzied. The sky above me swirled, and the wind picked up, howling through the trees. The air itself felt alive, crackling with energy. I had made a terrible mistake, but it wasn't just mine to bear. I was on my knees, the weight of the moment pressing down on me, suffocating every breath I took. The figures in the clearing drew closer, their movements slow and deliberate. Their eyes locked on me with a cold, unnerving certainty. The creatures, the watchers, circled around me, their eyes glowing with that same dreadful light, waiting for something. I tried to speak, but no words came. My mouth was dry, my body numb. I could feel the darkness spreading, seeping into the very air, and the stone beneath me seemed to pulse with the rhythm of an ancient heartbeat, pulling me deeper into its grip. "You've awoken the first of us," the figure said again, its voice like the scraping of metal on stone. "Now, the veil between worlds is shattered. The gate is open, and there is no turning back." I could barely process its words. My mind was reeling. What had I done? I had been so foolish, so naive. I thought I was just looking for missing campers. But now, I realized the truth. The forest wasn't just a place. It was a threshold, a barrier between this world and something far darker, something that had been waiting for centuries. As the figure spoke, the ground trembled again, this time with more force, as if the earth itself was protesting. The air grew colder, the wind picking up, howling through the trees like a living thing. The watchers stepped aside, making way for someone to approach. A new figure emerged from the shadows. It was tall, taller than any man I had ever seen, its form cloaked in a swirling mist that seemed to cling to it like smoke. Its face was hidden in shadow, but its eyes, they were the brightest thing I had ever seen. They shone with an unnatural light, a burning intensity that made my skin crawl. I could feel them, piercing through me, probing the deepest parts of my soul. "You have opened the door," the figure said, its voice like thunder, reverberating through the clearing. "And now, you will witness what lies beyond." I tried to stand, to run, but my body was frozen. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The very air around me seemed to close in, suffocating me. I was trapped in this nightmare, with no way out. The creature, whatever it was, took a step forward. The watchers followed, their eyes now filled with reverence. The creature raised a hand, and the earth beneath us seemed to quake in response, as if the very ground was bowing before it. I could feel the presence of something ancient, something malevolent, drawing closer. It was like the trees themselves were alive, their roots twisting and turning beneath the surface, as if they were reaching for me. "You should have left," the creature whispered, its voice a cold, mocking echo. "But now, you will see. You will understand what you have done." The sky above me darkened, the clouds swirling like a storm that had no end. The wind picked up, howling through the trees, as the air became thick with the scent of decay. I could hear the whispers again, louder now, filling my mind with fragmented thoughts, each one more terrifying than the last. And then, it all came crashing down. The ground split open, and from the depths, a massive shape began to rise. It was monstrous, its form like a twisted, writhing mass of shadows and darkness, its eyes burning with the same cold fire that filled the clearing. It was something from beyond, a creature that should never have been freed. Its form was too large, too twisted to comprehend, and as it rose, the very air around us seemed to warp, bending and twisting like reality itself was breaking. The watchers bowed low to it, their chants growing louder, and I realized then what they were. They weren't guardians of the forest. They were servants, worshippers, bound to this dark entity. They were here to open the gate, to release what had been sealed away. And now it was free. The creature let out a roar, a sound that shook the very fabric of existence. The air trembled, and the trees around us cracked, their branches snapping like brittle bones. The ground beneath me trembled as if it were alive, alive with fear. I couldn't escape. I couldn't move. All I could do was watch as the forest, the world around me, seemed to unravel. And then, in that final moment, I saw the truth. This was not the end. It was only the beginning. The veil was gone. The boundary between worlds had been shattered. And now, something ancient, something powerful, was unleashed upon the world. And there was no one left to stop it. The creature's roar echoed through the forest, filling the air with an unbearable pressure. The very ground beneath me seemed to shift, the trees groaning as if they were alive, their roots twisting and coiling beneath the earth. The darkness that had once been confined to the forest now spilled out like ink in water, spreading across the landscape, drowning everything in its path. I could feel Aton's overwhelming weight, a presence so vast and powerful that it seemed to swallow everything around me. The trees, the creatures, the watchers, they were all bound to it, slaves to its ancient will. And now, it was free. My heart pounded in my chest as the creature, this monstrous being, continued to rise from the earth. Its body was a grotesque amalgamation of shadow and tendrils, its form constantly shifting and writhing, as if it couldn't decide what it truly was. It wasn't just a monster, it was a force, a living embodiment of the darkness that had always lingered at the edge of the world. The watchers stepped back, giving the creature space to grow. Their chanting grew louder, a deep, guttural sound that reverberated through the forest. It was a language I couldn't understand, but I felt its meaning deep in my bones. Release, unleash, claim. The creature's eyes, glowing with an unnatural fire, locked onto me. I felt its gaze pierce through me, cutting into my very soul. I could hear its thoughts, or perhaps it was my own mind breaking under the weight of its presence. You are nothing. You have opened the gate, and now you will suffer the consequences. I wanted to scream, to fight, but my body wouldn't obey. I was paralyzed, caught in the grip of something far beyond my understanding. The creatures know. The watchers continued their chants, urging the beast to grow, to become more powerful, to consume everything in its path. The sky above us twisted, dark clouds swirling in unnatural patterns, like the storm was being controlled by some unseen hand. The air was thick with the smell of decay and rot, the very scent of death. I could taste it on my tongue, feel it in the pit of my stomach. But then, something happened. A flicker of light, weak at first, began to emerge from the depths of the forest. A single, steady beam of light that pierced through the darkness, cutting through the tendrils of shadow like a blade. It was distant, but it was there. I don't know what drove me to move. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was the last remnants of my will to survive. But I broke free from the creature's gaze, forced myself to turn away, and began to run. I didn't know where I was running to. I didn't know if there was even a place left to escape. But I ran, my feet crashing through the underbrush, my heart thudding in my chest, each breath ragged and shallow. The darkness was closing in, but the beam of light grew brighter as I stumbled forward. It was drawing me in, guiding me, like a beacon of hope in the suffocating void. I didn't look back. I couldn't look back. But the world around me was unraveling. I could hear the creature's roars growing louder, its voice tearing through the fabric of reality itself. The ground shook beneath me, and the trees seemed to stretch toward me, their branches reaching out like fingers, trying to pull me back into the abyss. The beam of light grew brighter, and then, in a final, desperate push, I reached it. The light enveloped me like a shield, the brightness almost blinding in contrast to the dark forces swirling behind me. I stumbled forward, desperate, but the moment I stepped into the beam, a strange calm washed over me. It wasn't just the light, it was the feeling of it. A presence, ancient and powerful, was guiding me, protecting me from the darkness that chased me. I dared a glance behind me, my heart still pounding in my chest. The creature loomed in the clearing, its form now fully risen from the earth. casting an immense shadow over everything. The watchers stood around it, their chanting now reaching a fever pitch, their voices distorted and unnatural. The ground beneath them cracked open, and from the fissures, more shadows poured out, like a tide of malevolent beings rising to claim the world. But the light, this strange, otherworldly light, continued to grow brighter, pushing back against the encroaching darkness. I could feel its power, and for the first time, I realized it wasn't just guiding me. It was fighting back. It was the only thing standing between the world I knew and the hellish nightmare that had been unleashed. I ran faster, driven by a mix of fear and hope. The light's pull became stronger as I moved toward it, like a magnetic force urging me to go faster. My legs burned, my breath ragged, but the light, the hope, kept me going. Ahead of me, I saw a figure emerge from the light. It was a person, or at least, they appeared to be. The figure was cloaked in white, their face hidden beneath a hood, but there was something comforting about them, something familiar. The figure raised a hand, and in that moment, I knew I wasn't alone. "Come, Darren," the figure said, their voice soft but powerful. "It is not too late." I didn't hesitate. I reached out toward the figure, closing the gap between us, and the moment I touched their hand, a surge of energy coursed through me. It was like a flood, filling me with warmth and strength, pushing the fear from my chest. "Who are you?" I gasped, my voice trembling. "I am the guardian of the veil," the figure said, their voice calm and steady. "And you, Darren, are the one who must close the gate." "The gate," I repeated, still trying to make sense of everything. "The gate is open. The creatures are free. How can I stop them?" The guardian's grip tightened around my hand. "You have already begun the process. The light you have found is part of the old power, the one that binds the worlds. You are not here by accident. You were chosen to stand between these worlds, to close the gate before it devours everything." I looked back toward the clearing. The creature had begun to move, its form massive and nightmarish, its tendrils reaching out like living shadows, spreading across the earth. The watchers were no longer chanting, they were howling, their faces twisted in grotesque rapture as they celebrated the destruction that was unfolding. But the guardian held my gaze. "You must finish what you started. The veil will not hold forever. You have the power. You must act now." Without another word, the guardian raised their hand, and I felt a pulse of energy shoot through me. It was warm, like sunlight on a winter's day, but it was also heavy, almost painful. It felt as though the very fabric of reality itself was being torn apart and stitched back together in an instant. I looked back at the creature, the monster's gaze locked onto me, its eyes burning with the promise of annihilation, but I could see it now, its true form, hidden beneath the shadows. It was vast, a force that had no name, a primal darkness that fed on fear and chaos. But now, standing in the light, I wasn't afraid. I couldn't afford to be. I raised my hand, the energy swirling around me, and focused every ounce of my will on the beast before me. My thoughts became a storm, a whirlwind of determination and defiance. I wouldn't let this thing destroy everything I had fought for. I wouldn't let it take over the world. With a final, overwhelming surge, I thrust my hand forward. The light erupted. The creature screamed, a sound so powerful that it shattered the air. The force of the blast was blinding, and for a moment, everything around me was lost in a flash of pure light. The very trees seemed to bend and shudder as the pulse rippled outward, tearing through the forest, shaking the ground. And then, silence. When the light faded, the creature was gone. The shadows were retreating, vanishing into the ether as though they had never existed. The watchers, too, were gone, their forms crumbling into dust. The earth beneath me was calm, as though the storm had passed. I sank to my knees, my body exhausted, my mind reeling from the power I had just wielded. The guardian stood beside me, their hand on my shoulder, steadying me. "It is done," they said softly. "The veil is whole again." I looked around at the clearing, the silence now overwhelming. The air felt still, almost serene, as if the forest was breathing again, finally at peace. But I knew that peace wouldn't last forever. The darkness had been repelled, but it was still there, waiting just beyond the edge of the world. And as I stood up, my body weary but resolute, I realized the truth. This battle had ended, but the war was far from over. The weight of what had happened crashed down on me like a tidal wave, the exhaustion settling into every bone in my body. The creature, whatever it had been, was gone. The forest, once dark and twisted, seemed to breathe again, alive with a quiet that was almost too serene. But I knew the truth now. The peace I had fought for was fragile. It wouldn't last forever. I stood there, taking in the quiet, the stillness of the woods. The guardian, whoever they truly were, remained by my side, their presence steady and unwavering. "You've done it," they said, their voice warm but carrying an edge of something deeper, something timeless. "The gate has been sealed, and the darkness has been pushed back." But there was no joy in their words, no relief, only the weight of knowledge, the knowledge that, despite what we had just accomplished, the battle was far from over. "We've only won a battle," I said quietly, feeling the burden of the truth press against my chest. "The darkness is still out there, and the veil remains thin. It's only a matter of time before it returns." The guardian's gaze turned toward the distant horizon, where the trees still stood tall, shrouded in the mist that had come with the night. "Yes, but you are not alone, Darren. There are others like you who have felt the call. You are the first, but not the last. You have proven yourself worthy." I turned to them, confusion flashing in my eyes. "What do you mean? I'm just a ranger. I don't understand. What am I supposed to do now?" "You are the Watcher," the guardian said simply, their gaze still distant, as if looking beyond the trees. "The veil is weakening. It has been for centuries. There will always be those who seek to tear it down, to open the gate. You are the one who stands between these worlds now. It is your responsibility to protect the balance." I shook my head, disbelief rising inside me. "I'm just a man. I'm not a soldier. I don't have the power to fight this." "You do," the guardian said, their voice firm, their eyes locking onto mine. "You've already proven that. The light you wield, the power within you, it is the legacy of those who have come before. The Watchers, those who guarded the veil, have always been there, watching, waiting. Now, it is your turn." I didn't understand. I had been a ranger, a protector of the forest, yes, but nothing like this. What I had done, what I had faced. It felt like something out of a nightmare, a horror I couldn't truly comprehend. How could I protect the world from something so vast, so ancient? The guardian took a step closer, their hand resting lightly on my shoulder. "You are not alone, Darren. The others will come. You will find them, and together, you will learn how to wield the light. The veil must be protected. The darkness will always seek to return. It is your duty now." I swallowed, trying to come to terms with the magnitude of what had just happened. "And what happens now? What do I do? Where do I go?" The guardian's expression softened, but there was still a sadness in their eyes. "The Watchers are scattered now, hidden, but they remain. You will find them in time, and when the darkness rises again, you will stand together to face it." I took a deep breath, the weight of responsibility settling over me like a cloak. The road ahead was uncertain, and I knew it would be dangerous. But for the first time since all of this began, I felt a flicker of resolve within me. I couldn't change the past. I couldn't undo the mistakes that had been made, but I could move forward. I could fight. I nodded slowly. "I'll do it. I'll protect the veil. I'll find the others." The guardian smiled, a small but knowing smile. "You will not be alone. The Watchers are waiting, and when the time comes, you will stand together." And with that, the guardian turned, slowly fading into the light, leaving me standing in the clearing alone. The forest around me was calm now, the sky slowly brightening as the first light of dawn began to break through the canopy. But as the first rays of sunlight touched the earth, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting. The peace was temporary. The darkness was never truly gone. I wasn't ready. I didn't feel ready, but I was the watcher now, and I had a duty to protect the world from the darkness that waited just beyond the veil. Time passed quickly, but it felt like I had been standing at the edge of something enormous, waiting for it to unfold. I had returned to my duties as a ranger in the forest, but the life I once knew felt distant. Every creak of a tree, every rustle of the leaves, made me listen more carefully, feel the weight of the responsibility on my shoulders. The world was no longer as simple as it had once been. I kept my eyes open, watching for anything out of the ordinary, waiting for the moment the darkness would return. And every night, when the moon hung high in the sky, I felt a pull something deep within the earth, calling to me. The Watchers, the ancient beings who had stood guard for centuries, were out there, somewhere. I just had to find them, but no one seemed to know. The people around me went about their lives, unaware of the thin veil that separated them from the abyss, and I couldn't tell anyone. I couldn't explain. The burden was mine alone. It wasn't until I received a call from Mike, the same voice that had warned me to stay away, that things began to change. "Darren, you there?" Mike's voice came through the static, sounding distant, but urgent. "I'm here, Mike. What's going on? You won't believe this," he said, his voice low. "But I've been getting reports of strange happenings near the old cave system. People have been going missing. It's like they just vanish. No signs, no traces. Just gone." The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. The old caves, the ones beneath the mountain. I'd heard rumors about them, but they were mostly dismissed. There were stories about strange echoes and shadows moving beneath the earth, but no one really knew for sure. "I'm on my way," I said, my heart pounding in my chest. The forest, the caves, they all felt connected. The darkness had never left. It had only been waiting. Mike met me at the entrance to the cave system. The air was thick with moisture, and the ground was slick with a heavy fog that seemed to rise from the earth itself. The trees around the cave were twisted and gnarled, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. "You sure you want to go in there?" Mike asked, his face tense. "I've been hearing things, Darren, and I've seen things. This doesn't feel right." I looked at the cave, its dark mouth yawning before me like the entrance to another world. "I don't have a choice," I replied. "This is part of it. The Watchers are tied to the veil, and if something's happening here, I have to find out what." Mike didn't argue. He grabbed his gear, and we moved forward into the darkness. The moment we stepped inside, the temperature seemed to drop. The air grew colder, and the walls of the cave felt damp, like the earth itself was breathing. I could feel the presence of something ancient, something that had been dormant for so long. The veil was thin, here thinner than it had ever been before. The deeper we went, the more unsettling the place became. The cave walls began to pulse faintly, as though something was alive inside them. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. And then we found it. A strange, glowing symbol was carved into the rock, its lines shimmering with a sickly green light. It pulsed, a rhythmic beat that seemed to echo through the cave, vibrating the very air. The symbol was familiar. I had seen it before, on the stone in the clearing, the one I had touched before awakening the darkness. "This is it," I whispered. "The gate? It's here." Mike stared at the symbol, his face pale. "What does it mean? What's it doing?" Before I could answer, the ground trembled again, stronger this time, sending a shockwave through the cave. A low, rumbling growl filled the air, and the walls began to shake, dust falling from the ceiling in thick clouds. The ground split open beneath our feet, and a massive form began to rise from the depths of the cave. The creature was colossal, its form dark and shifting, like a living nightmare. Its eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, and its growl reverberated in my bones. It wasn't just one creature, it was the awakening of something far more ancient, far more powerful. "Get back," I shouted, pulling Mike toward the entrance. But it was too late. The creature's tendrils shot out, wrapping around the cave walls, pulling itself free. The ground cracked open, and the cave seemed to dissolve, the very fabric of the world unraveling before our eyes. The creature, no, the entity loomed before us, massive and incomprehensible, its form flickering between solid and liquid, like an ancient darkness that had never fully belonged to this world. Its eyes glowed with an eerie, greenish fire, and as it moved, the cave seemed to shake and crumble. The very earth trembled beneath us, threatening to swallow us whole. Mike was frozen in place, staring up at the massive shape that loomed over us. I could hear his breath ragged and uneven, but I couldn't afford to hesitate. "Mike, we need to move. Now." I grabbed his arm and pulled him back, toward the narrow path we had come through, but the ground buckled beneath our feet, and we both stumbled. The creature's growl reverberated around us, louder now, like a distant storm breaking, the air heavy with malice. I glanced over my shoulder, my heart in my throat, and that was when I saw it. The creature was no longer just a shadow, it was solid, real, and its vast tendrils were reaching out, breaking through the walls, distorting the very fabric of reality around it. The ground split open, revealing a chasm that seemed to stretch endlessly, a dark abyss that called to us with a terrifying force. "We're too late," I muttered under my breath. I could feel the darkness seeping into my bones, pulling me toward it, urging me to give in to the void. Mike snapped out of his trance, grabbing me by the shoulder. "What now? What do we do, Darren?" I could feel the weight of the answer in my chest, like a heavy stone that I didn't want to speak aloud. The Watchers, they were right. This is it. The gate has been opened, and there's no closing it without a price. Suddenly, the creature let out a roar, so powerful that it rattled the very air around us. The cave shook violently, and the walls began to collapse, sending chunks of stone and dust flying. We had to move, but the way out was being swallowed by the darkness. I didn't have time to think. My instincts kicked in, and I grabbed Mike's arm, pulling him toward the only escape I could see, the narrow passageway that led further into the depths of the cave. The creature was still rising, its tendrils reaching toward us, but there was no choice. We had to escape. We sprinted through the narrow passage, the sound of the earth shaking, of the creature's growls vibrating through the air, pushing us forward. The tunnel seemed to close in around us, the walls narrowing, but we pressed on, the air thick with dust and the stench of decay. We reached another cavern, this one vast, its ceiling lost in shadow. The air was colder now, and the ground beneath us was slick with moisture. In the center of the cavern stood a large stone altar, its surface covered in ancient symbols, similar to the ones we had seen before, the ones that had marked the opening of the gate. "This is it," I breathed. "The source." Mike looked at me, fear and confusion in his eyes. "What do we do?" I didn't know how to answer. I only knew that the altar was somehow connected to the creature, to the force that was rising. The Watchers had warned me the gate could only be sealed if the source was destroyed, if the energy that fueled the darkness was severed. I stepped forward, feeling the energy in the air, the pulse of power that emanated from the altar. The stone was warm beneath my fingertips, alive with an ancient force. It was drawing me in, pulling at my very soul, and I knew that if I didn't act now, the creature would fully emerge, and there would be no stopping it. I placed my hand on the altar, closing my eyes, focusing on the light inside, the light that had once pushed back the darkness, the warmth that had given me strength in the clearing. The light was still there, deep inside, but it was fading. I had to act. With every ounce of strength I had left, I began to chant the words the Guardian had whispered to me, words that echoed through my mind like a distant memory. The energy in the cavern shifted, the stone beneath me vibrating, as if the world itself was resisting the change. The creature's growl became a screech, high-pitched and terrible, as the power in the cavern began to spiral out of control. The walls cracked, the ceiling began to crumble, but I held firm. I could feel the light inside me flickering, fighting the darkness, struggling to keep the balance. The ground shook, the cave trembling with the force of the battle between light and dark. I could see it now, the creature's true form, a dark mass that seemed to bleed into reality itself. It was trying to pull me into the abyss, but I resisted, holding on to the light, holding on to the power that had once protected the world. And then, with a final surge, I pushed the energy through the stone, channeling it into the altar. The power exploded outward in a blinding flash of light, and the cavern was filled with a deafening roar. The creature's scream was swallowed by the light, and for a moment, everything went silent. When I opened my eyes, the cavern was still. The altar had cracked, its surface shattered, the symbols fading from existence. The creature was gone, vanquished by the light, but the air still felt heavy, as if the darkness was retreating but not entirely gone. Mike and I stood there, catching our breath, staring at the remnants of the altar. The cave around us had begun to collapse, and I knew that this place, this source of darkness, had been destroyed. The cave around us continued to rumble, the tremors reverberating through the walls, as the very earth seemed to be reacting to the destruction of the source. The light, the surge of energy, had vanished, leaving behind only a quiet stillness, a stillness that was so deep, so profound, that it made the weight of what we had just done settle in even more. Mike was breathing heavily, his hand pressed against the stone wall for support. His face was pale, his eyes wide with disbelief. What the hell did we just do, Darren? I didn't answer immediately. I was still processing everything: the creature, the watchers, the power I had tapped into. It felt as though I had ripped apart a part of the world's fabric, and had only a glimpse of what was on the other side. We stopped it, I said quietly. We stopped the darkness from fully crossing over. But it's not over. Not yet. Mike looked at me, his expression darkening. What do you mean? The source is destroyed. The creature's gone. Isn't that enough? I shook my head. The source was just one piece of it. The veil, the barrier between worlds, is still fraying. The Watchers, they knew this would happen. They've been guarding it for centuries. But the darkness, it's like a seed. Even though we destroyed the altar, the corruption still lingers. And there are others out there who will seek to open the gate again. Mike stepped closer, his brow furrowing. So, what now? What do we do next? I didn't have an immediate answer. The weight of it all was too much. For years, I had been a ranger, protecting the land, keeping people safe. But now I was tasked with something far greater. I was one of the Watchers. The responsibility felt suffocating. Now, we find the others, I said, finally. There are others who have been chosen, just like me. The Watchers are scattered, but they're out there. I have to find them. We all have to stand together. Mike nodded, the gravity of the situation sinking in. You're right. We can't do this alone. And you're not alone. I'm with you, Darren. Whatever it takes. I glanced back at the cave's entrance, the dark mouth that had once been the source of so much terror. The trees outside were still standing tall, but there was an unease in the air, a sense that things had changed permanently. The darkness might have been pushed back for now, but it was always going to be lurking in the shadows, waiting for its chance to return. I knew that better than anyone. I need to contact the others, I said. There's no time to waste. The veil is fragile, and there are more who will try to break it. We need to be ready. Mike clapped me on the shoulder, his face hardening with resolve. Let's get to it. We'll find them. We'll make sure this doesn't happen again." I gave him a tight nod, knowing that this was just the beginning of a much larger battle. The darkness was never truly gone. It would always find a way back, but we would be ready for it. The weeks that followed were filled with more questions than answers. The world felt the same, but to me, everything had changed. The veil had been weakened, the creatures had been sent back to the shadows, but I could still feel the crack in reality, the thinness of the boundary, and the whispers those ancient voices had only grown louder, echoing through my thoughts. Mike and I traveled, following any lead we could find, seeking out others who had been touched by the veil. We found them in unexpected places. Some were like me, drawn to the forest by a strange calling. Others were individuals who had experienced strange, unexplainable events in their lives. They had all felt the pull of the darkness, but had never understood what it was until now. Together, we began to form a small group. Each person brought something different to the table: skills, knowledge, or a deep connection to the unseen world. Some were reluctant, unsure of what they were getting into, but as the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together, we knew that we had no choice. We were the last line of defense. The nights were the worst. I would lie awake in my tent, listening to the wind, hearing things that weren't there, feeling the eyes of the forest on me. The creatures might have retreated, but the darkness was still there, festering beneath the surface. One night, as we camped by a quiet stream, the air suddenly shifted. The forest around us seemed to hold its breath, and then, in the distance, I saw it. A flicker of movement, something fast, something large, moving between the trees. I tensed, my hand instinctively reaching for my rifle. The others were on alert too, their eyes scanning the woods. Something was out there, and it wasn't going to stop. The flicker of movement in the woods wasn't just my imagination. It was real. Something was watching us, circling us from the shadows. The air around us felt charged, thick with an energy that sent a chill down my spine. I could sense it, the same eerie presence that had followed me in the forest, lurking just out of sight. "Get ready," I whispered, my voice low and steady. The others readied their weapons, their eyes scanning the tree line, waiting for the first sign of movement. But it was silent. The forest had gone quiet, too quiet. No wind, no rustling leaves, just an oppressive stillness that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Something was wrong. Suddenly, a shape darted across the edge of the camp, too fast for me to make out. My heart raced, and without thinking, I bolted after it, hearing the others follow close behind. The forest closed in around us as we pushed through the underbrush, the sounds of our footsteps drowned out by the pounding of my own heart. We stopped at the edge of a clearing, breathless eyes scanning the dark expanse, and then we saw a figure standing in the center of the clearing. It was tall, cloaked in shadows, and though its features were obscured, I knew it wasn't human. The air around it seemed to shimmer with an unnatural force, as if reality itself was bending in its presence. "You've come far," the figure spoke, its voice deep, resonating through the very ground beneath us. "But you cannot stop what has already begun." The darkness in the forest seemed to thicken, the trees themselves twisting and groaning as if they were alive. And then, like a ripple in the air, the ground split open beneath the figure, revealing an abyss that stretched far deeper than the earth should allow. "We won't let you win," I shouted, stepping forward. "We've already closed the gate. The darkness will not return." The figure laughed, a cold, hollow sound that sent a wave of dread washing over me. "You think you've stopped it? You've only delayed it. The veil was never meant to be kept. It is inevitable." Before I could react, the ground beneath us shifted, and from the depths of the chasm, countless forms began to rise, shadows, creatures, and specters that twisted in and out of reality, their glowing eyes burning with malice. They were the ancient beings, the Watchers turned to servants of darkness, now fully unleashed. I turned to my team, adrenaline surging. Stay together. Hold the line. We raised our weapons, but we knew this was a fight we couldn't win with force alone. The power we faced was beyond any weapon we carried. We needed to stop the source, the very essence of the darkness that had crossed the veil. I turned to the Guardian's teachings in my mind, the words that had once been whispered to me in the depths of the forest. There had to be a way to push the darkness back, to close the gate for good. Focus, I shouted, gathering the others around me. We have to channel the light. Together, we stood in the center of the clearing, and I closed my eyes, focusing on the energy within me. The light that had once driven back the creature in the cave. The others joined in, each of us reaching deep within ourselves, searching for that power. The darkness around us pressed in, but we resisted, pushing forward, letting the light build, grow stronger. The creatures hissed, their forms warping and shrieking, as the light began to push them back. The chasm began to close, the ground repairing itself, but it was only temporary. The creature at the center of the clearing laughed again, the sound full of despair. "You cannot close the gate forever," it said, its voice echoing through the night. "The darkness is eternal." But we weren't finished. We couldn't be. The light we were channeling began to pulse, brighter and brighter, the force of it growing until it lit up the entire clearing. The shadows screamed, their forms writhing in the light, but they couldn't hold against it. The figure in the center reached out, its form flickering, but the light had become too strong, too powerful. With a final, blinding flash, the figure was consumed by the light, and the creatures surrounding us dissolved into shadows, their whispers fading away like a distant storm. The ground shook one last time, but then nothing. Silence. We stood there, panting, the forest eerily still, once again. The creatures were gone. The veil, while still thin, was no longer torn. The gate had closed. But I knew, deep inside, this wasn't the end. It would never be. The darkness had been repelled, but it wasn't destroyed. The Watchers, the beings who had guarded the veil for so long, were still out there, and so were the others who sought to break the boundaries. But for now, the world was safe. For now, we had won. Months passed. The world had returned to a semblance of normality, though there were whispers among those who knew the truth. The Watchers had gone into hiding again, scattered across the world, but I knew they were out there, waiting, watching, preparing for the next time the darkness would seek to return. Mike and I returned to our roles as protectors, but no longer just of the land. We were part of something larger now, something far greater than ourselves. We would remain vigilant, standing between the world and the darkness, watching for the cracks in the veil that could tear it all apart. And as the sun rose over the forest, I knew the battle was not truly over. But as long as the Watchers stood, the light would always rise to meet the darkness.